Torres.
And I'm Liz Gonzalez. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday night. Well, the California Insurance Commissioner announced today that he would approve State Farm's emergency request to raise home insurance rates on one condition. If that condition is met, the commissioner says the emergency rate would increase premiums for homeowners by 22%, 15% for tenants, and 38% for rental owners.
Now, Fox 26 News reporter Myra Franco joins us live with more and shares what the Insurance State Commissioner, Ricardo Lara, asked of the company. All right, Myra, what is that one condition?
In a public hearing scheduled for April 8th, the Insurance Commissioner says State Farm will need to show proof with data that they're in need of that increase. Then a decision will be made.
The state's largest insurer, State Farm, put in an emergency request to up home insurance rates once again. We reported before the giant saying it needed an increase to prevent, quote, a dire situation. But California's Insurance Commissioner, Ricardo Lara, says it needs to prove it. His spokesperson, Michael Soller, filled us in on what was said in a private meeting held this week by Lara, State Farm executives, and consumer watchdog lawyers.
They want to increase their rates. They say that they're having financial distress. Well, we're going to hold this hearing to get to the bottom of it. And ultimately, if they show that they're in financial distress, Commissioner Lara is prepared to approve this rate hearing.
Executive Director Carmen Balber with Consumer Watchdog applauds Lara for calling on a public hearing and for requesting that State Farm justifies its requests to ask consumers for more money.
That's something that State Farm has so far refused to do. They wanted consumers to pay now and ask questions later. And the commissioner said, no, we're not going to do that.
A public hearing is now scheduled for April 8th.
Commissioner Lara is really asking some tough questions, and he's expecting some real answers here from State Farm.
Answers to questions like, where does State Farm stand financially? What happens if another wildfire were to break out in the coming months? What does the data show about the impacts of the recent LA wildfires? And what rates do they need to be able to keep paying their future claims?
They have to come to the Department of Insurance. They have to show us the complete data, and we have to go through that to make sure that we agree.
Both Soller and Balber said that State Farm is the only insurance giant asking for those increases. Both also said no other companies are or have been, and kind of find it unusual. Liz Monte sending it back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you, Myra. If Lara approves the emergency request by State Farm, it is expected to go into effect by June 1st.
State Farm issued a response over today's development, saying in part it's time for certainty in the California insurance market for our customers. The provisional nature of today's decision does not improve that certainty, but it's a step in the right direction. We are moving forward with implementing this provisionally approved rate and will continue to work with the California Department of Insurance for a sustainable future for the California insurance market.
So, all right, State Farm says it needs to raise rates to keep in line with rising costs and climate risks. Here's why this is a big deal. State Farm covers 2.8 million customers, about 20% of California's homeowners. 1 in every 5 homeowners, that translates to. The insurer has had over $5 billion, that should be $billion in losses since 2016, it reports. And until 2022, it had raised premiums just under 7% a year. But by 2023, it stopped writing new homeowners coverage. And by 3 months later, it returned with a request for more, include that to another 30% hike to remain solvent. That request was pending at the time of the LA wildfires. It estimates losses from that catastrophe from the LA wildfires at now $7.9 billion.
And the economic effects of the wildfire are not isolated to Southern California, as we can see. In fact, those will be felt all across the state.
And we're going to reach a point where insurance and utilities are going to surpass, rent costs, are going to surpass basic housing costs, and that is not feasible for the future. And we need action, we need collaboration, and we need to do things that are different, whether it be include catastrophe modeling to bring back more carriers to the state, address reinsurance. We need to provide stable rates for our employers and our residents alike.
Oliver tells our crew it's especially important for people to reach out to their elected officials. Cannot emphasize that enough, to let them know how these proposed hikes would impact their families.